It is really language technology combined with that precious human linguistic mind.
$1 million, they said, we are seeking a seed round of $1 million to continue expanding in the B2B market.
They're saying benefits, relocation budget provided for interstate or overseas candidates and visa application fees covered. And welcome to the pod of Slator, number 46. Hello here from Zurich.
Hi from London.
Hey, so this is your first day in lockdown.
First day, yeah, back in lockdown.
Back in lockdown.
Yeah. But hopefully, well, apparently it's only going to be a one month lockdown this time. So.
And so you're in tier, what, 3?
No, I think they've scrapped the whole tier thing and just put the entire country on a national lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the tier system lasted like 2 weeks or something.
Wow, okay. Well, here we are. SlatorPod, people's favorite language industry podcast. Let's run you through the agenda. So we just had a super interesting discussion with Tea Dietterich, the CEO of Australia-based language service provider 2M. And usually we record the guest segment after our talk, but this time because of time differences, she's based in Australia. We recorded earlier. That was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I learned a ton about Australia, so stay tuned for that segment. And also this week I presented at the SDL Trotters Live virtual conference. So many people, hundreds and hundreds of people. In the audience, so well done to SDL. Also interesting platform. They had like a streaming platform that then like was fed into a remote conferencing remote conferencing platform. So it was but it was super easy for the speaker.
So you had to connect to both, or no, just one?
No, that's the thing. Like I literally just like click, that's it. So it was really well managed, and it was really easy to connect. So you could kind of focus on speaking and not like on clicking buttons. So
yeah, which is good.
So on our side, of course, we're also busy preparing for our very own remote conference, SlatorCon Remote, December 3rd. We got the TMS panel is now complete. We got Bob Villens, the CEO of XTM International. We got Balazs Kish, co-CEO of MemoQ, and then Jack Weldy from SmartLink, the CEO. Really looking forward to that. I think I need to moderate that. I would want to moderate that.
Yeah, you're cool. Putting your hand up to moderate.
I think I should. Yeah.
Yeah, do it.
All right. What else do we have on the program, Esther?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, we talked a lot about MedTech and the MedTech report that was published last week, but we have also now confirmed the MedTech panel for SlatorCon Remote. So we have localization or linguistic service managers from 2 of the biggest medical device companies in the world. So we have Orally from Varian Medical Systems, and we have Bibiana from Medtronic. So looking forward to that as well.
Those are very big companies. And that's going to be a great panel. We also got Jamie Punishill from Linebridge, the CMO, is going to tell us more about like the digital marketing transformation that Linebridge underwent, and that seems to be fairly complete. That's a great case study for LSPs looking for this type of digital transformation.
Is that the whole rebrand? Because they did the website and things, or just everything?
Yeah, it was like everything. It was repositioning, the AI business that they had, and like really positioning that much more strongly. I mean, they do have a giant business in that kind of data annotation AI space. It just that it wasn't really highlighted as such, and now they redid the entire presence online, offline, everywhere. New logo, new corporate colors, that's a lot of work. So we also got Benjamin Fraise from Accolade, the president owner of Accolade, and we're also going to have the CEO of Accolade, Olivier Marcheteau, on. I think it's a kind of a joint presentation, so cool. And then we also have Intento as our lead partner. I might have mentioned it last time, but they're our lead partner, so they're going to talk about MT curation, MT automation, etc. Long, short, sign up and join us on December 3rd. Today, we will talk about Smartcat Series B funding, Straker LanguageLine and Honyaku posting results. Then we got the job index. And speaking about jobs, And speaking about Australia, we had a position by Canva, my very favorite tool. I think it's number one. Probably not.
I confess, yeah, you do like it a lot.
I like it a lot. It's so cool. It's so easy. And so they're looking for a localization project manager based in Sydney. And get that, they are, and let me just pull up the ad. Just need to pull up log jobs here. They're saying benefits, relocation budget provided for interstate or overseas candidates and visa application fees covered.
It's like me. I'll go to Australia.
No, you can't.
I don't think they'd let, I mean, they're not, theoretically they're paying or they're helping with relocation, but in practice, the country's not letting anybody else in. By the sounds of things.
They'll let you in. They just have to stay in quarantine. And it's probably a bit of a longer process, but that is amazing. I mean, imagine. So anybody that's in the localization project manager, that's interested in that job, they'll pay for your relocation. So there's a global competition.
If you don't want to have to go into winter in Europe or the US, then head over to Australia for a new role.
I would move. Maybe in the future I will move to Sydney. Sydney's
great.
It's fantastic. It's what a great city. It's just so far away from everything else, but you don't really have to go anywhere else. I mean, I was in the Blue Mountains when I was in Sydney as well. It wasn't too long. It was just a week. But it's Blue Mountains, Sydney, the beach is everything. It's just it's the perfect city. So anyway, Canva hiring log project manager. Go to Log Jobs, check it out. So Smartcat raised a Series B, $14.6 million. And you know that a company's focused on their product when they don't even bother announcing it. So, they didn't. They raised this in August. It's a US-based TMS, CAT platform, marketplace. And we talked to Ivan Smolnikov, the CEO, who gave us kind of an exclusive on this. I got to say, hat tip, though, to Konstantin Dranch, the localization industry expert, who posted it on LinkedIn because he found this on Crunchbase that they raised that money. And Crunchbase, in turn, gathers that kind of probably automated, gathers that data from like U.S. government, like the Edgar filing database, where you have to even like private industry fundraising, you have to file there. It's very well hidden. So thanks, Konstantin. That was great. So Ivan didn't comment on the valuation, but he said valuation was good. It was in line with what a fast-growing SaaS or marketplace at our stage could get in the US. So who's Smartcat? Well, again, based in the US, they've got over 100 full-time equivalents. They're tech only, so it's only the platform. So they don't do services at all. And he was pretty strict that they don't do that. They have thousands of clients. Very strong with the LSP segment. And getting traction with enterprise as well. It's really a very, very comprehensive platform, and they have the LSPs, hundreds of thousands, I think, of freelancers on them there, and then enterprise clients. So, but what I think really makes them somewhat unique is kind of this end-to-end component to it, right? So they have everything from the linguist sourcing of the linguist, evaluating. They got that really big marketplace that they were traditionally have been known for. Then they have, the CAT, Smartcat. They have the CAT tool for production. And then the whole TMS component, until like the invoicing and the payment. I think, early on they had the payment portion was something they really worked on in the early days, if I remember correctly. And they really figured this out very early on, because payment is tricky. If you, anybody who's done the operations, they remember like
cross-border payments and stuff in particular as well.
Yeah, cross-border payment. I mean, I remember in China, we couldn't use PayPal. It was kind of illegal to use PayPal. So it was actually really hard to pay linguists out of mainland China. Probably still is. And so if you can help, LSP solve that problem, you're in a good place. They have this marketplace focus. So they have a big marketplace, and they hired the former Upwork CEO, joined their board. We probably spoke about it a few episodes back, and so he knows a thing or two about marketplaces. And Ivan, the CEO, he posted something on Medium, what is it, a blog platform, content platform last year on like why he thinks many of the B2B service marketplaces failed. He said it's because many of them are horizontal and not vertical, right? And Smartcat is vertical, so it really focuses on a specific vertical, and then you can really kind of engineer everything around the complexities of a specific vertical, as opposed to, all right, I do graphic designers, translators, and WordPress developers. That's well,
otherwise the user base is just very, very, very diverse and has lots of different needs, I suppose, if you're multi-vertical or cross-vertical.
Yeah, because then you can't go into the depth, right? And then Smartcat obviously goes workflow. Yeah, exactly. Smartcat really goes into the into all of the different complexities that even within one vertical are there. So, automate payments, admin, vendor sourcing, testing, etc. And what's interesting that they have this kind of no seats policy. So that's how Ivan called it in the article. So so they don't charge you per user. At least kind of that's the idea, right? So it's kind of a flat fee, and then if you have 10 users or 20, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of different from most of the other SaaS tools I know. And another, again, somewhat unique component is that they really are focusing on the LSPs and have historically and are going in the future. And he said that they have like 17 members that have headed LSPs and many others that have worked in different LSP roles. So it's kind of people from the LSP side that know every little, problem or complication and trying to, build around this. So definitely a great sign of strength for them that they were able to raise it this year. And, it's going to help them grow faster. I mean, this is in a long line of fundings now. I mean, I think we put a list together. We have, on the MT side, we had Lingua Custodia getting funded in July 2019, Cantan and Iconic, getting acquired. Then we had WordBee. WordBee's, they sold the stake to Hong Kong-based Header Media. We got, of course, Unbubble, Lilt, Intento, Memsource. I mean, check this out. I mean, Localize Direct, Localize, then Localize.com as well.
Yep.
I could go on, but
all of the permutations of Localize.
You're right. Localize.com, Localize Direct, and Localize with a K. So lots and lots of funding. And then Taya just recently also. And that's just within the space of roughly,
I think like a year and a half roughly since
year and a half.
July last year. Yeah. Not quite a year. Well, yeah, not quite a year and a half.
And now people are looking for funding too. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, so we came across this, I think, on a press release on Slator that LanguaLine is looking for capital. So they are obviously looking to grow still, and they are sort of advertising, I suppose, for seed investors. So they're looking for $1 million. They said, we are seeking a seed round of $1 million to continue expanding in the B2B market.
I love that. They're putting out a press release on Slator that they're looking for funding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that wasn't the only, I don't think that was the actual sort of, that was part of the news of the press release, but it wasn't the only thing that they were sharing. So they were also talking about how many translations they've been doing daily now.
Yeah, you better give a pitch.
Translations. Well, yeah.
You better give a good pitch.
All right. Okay. I'm being super naive. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You better give a great pitch if you're looking for funding. So let's give them a bit of additional visibility. So if you're interested in investing,
sorry, go on.
No. If you're interested in investing in LanguaLine, check the press release out.
And you have a cool $1 million.
Who doesn't? Yeah, you have $1 million. Well, there's a lot of capital apparently. I mean, we just went through that list, right? So there's a lot of capital looking for a home in the language tech and language services space. So yeah, sorry, I cut you off there.
Yeah, no. Do we know who invested in Smartcat? Was that disclosed?
Matrix Partners. Yeah. Exactly. So it was they were also in the Series A. They were the lead investor. Apparently, they were the biggest one in this round as well. Yeah, thanks for that. I skipped that, and then a few others that came along from the Series A as well. But I think Matrix Partners is the key. Nice. Yeah, that's a big VC firm. Let's move on to the more well mature businesses, somewhat, right? So we've got Straker, LanguageLine, and Honyaku Center. I think good news all around.
Yeah, seems to be pretty much. So we had all of those companies basically providing business updates or sort of financial updates as of the end of September. So Straker, 6 months to the end of September, they posted unaudited revenues of nearly $10 million US. And they said that they're on a run rate for the financial year of around 19 million. So it was New Zealand dollars 28.7, and that was 4% ahead of the previous year. They also said another number of other financial metrics are up. So sales orders were up by nearly 30%, and customer receipts, because they kind of use some of these different reporting metrics as well. Their market cap is around 37 million US dollars. So it's down about down a third, I think, year to date still.
Let me go to our beautiful tracker and see how, because we have this real-time performance tracker of all the publicly listed ones. So how is Straker shares doing? They are they're flat. Yeah, they've been
flat since the announcement, right? Or
they're roughly flat since the announcement. Up quite strongly from like the March lows, but kind of trending somewhat. Yeah,
flat-ish. I mean, generally things seem to be going well for them. At least the CEO was very happy, sort of posting about it on LinkedIn or Twitter, I think. And they said they're planning to restart some acquisitions and probably going to complete at least one material acquisition before March. So seems to be positive signs there.
Cool.
At Straker. Yeah. LanguageLine. Well, so this is an entirely different business. And it's an interpreting provider that's also part of a massive publicly listed company. So Teleperformance is the parent company of LanguageLine. They're a France-based call center operator. It's huge. So the parent company released the financial results for the first 3 quarters, again, up to the end of September. They didn't specifically break out any numbers for LanguageLine, but they did highlight that LanguageLine was a really strong performer throughout the period and said that there was sustained expansion. They said that LanguageLine maintained strong growth that had resumed in June. I think we discussed that probably previously.
We did, yeah.
And they said that the LanguageLine operations are now enjoying robust growth. So that seems to be positive also.
I want to know their figures now. We'll reach out to them for
LanguageLine. Yeah, we probably won't find out until the end of the year, potentially.
And now our friends from Honyaku Center. What's going on? They're also it's slightly in Japan. It's slightly they have an improved outlook, right?
They did, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to quote the sort of Japanese yen figures because then it runs into the billions. But basically, they have improved their forecast for the 6 months to September 30th as well. So revised numbers mean that they're now forecasting half year, even though it's not, I guess it is a forecast because the numbers aren't confirmed, even though the period has actually ended. But they're saying they're now expecting $43 million rather than about $42 million. So, slightly more positive. And equally, they were forecasting, I think, a loss of about $380,000. And they've reduced that operating loss to around $100,000.
That's a small update.
In terms of, it's only $1 million type thing?
It's it's a very small
like inconsequential.
I don't know if I would.
I think it was something like 3%. I mean, if you look at the actual Japanese yen numbers, I think they've sort of revised it upwards by about 3%. But then obviously when you do the currency conversion, it's somewhat different.
So hang on. So they are half the size in terms of revenue. Straker, half the size of Straker, but they're the same market cap.
No, they're like way bigger because that was the half year. So full year, they're
sorry. Straker's half the size. Yeah. Oh no, it's a quarter.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
So it's possibly a quarter to a third, I'd say. But Honyaku Center is currently forecasting around $89 million, which is 9.3 billion Japanese yen for the full year. So they're about go on.
Yeah,
you're saying they've got the same market cap. Basically.
Same market cap for 4 times the revenue. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Much bigger market cap is our new monster super agency, RWS SDL, and they just closed yesterday. Maybe by the time we're putting this podcast out, we might have run a quick article on this as well. So that deal is finalized now.
Oh, awesome.
They got the approval of everyone, and SDL has stopped trading. Yeah, we need to update. So
does that mean because we were waiting for the final RWS shares or SDL shares on the day of the completion to be able to kind of work out how much
the
valuation would have been worth? No, I'm not asking you to, but I guess it means that we potentially now could figure that out if we were so inclined.
I emailed them. I tried the shortcut. I emailed them and asked, but I haven't heard back yet. Because
I know a few people with some SDL shares. I can maybe ask.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, we need to. Well, not that. Yeah, because there's also the component of the cash that SDL had, right? So I think if you just converted the share thing value, you might not actually have the actual price, because SDL also had some, actual cash on in the bank, which
cash in the bank.
Yeah, which you also have to account for in some sense. But anyway, deal closed. Monster, created big super agency now, and good luck with what's coming there. How are jobs doing? In our industry.
Jobs are doing well. So this is the job index that we track on a monthly basis. It's in November is the 4th consecutive month of growth since July, which was the lowest it's ever been. So across all of the metrics that we track, all of the numbers are up apart from one. And it climbed nearly 3 points to 105, just over 105 in November. And so that's back around the similar levels as of January 2019.
Yeah, probably very few of those jobs come with a relocation package, but still good to see that it's up. I can't get over this.
I know. Well, you apply.
No, but I mean, if I had that profile, right age, wanted to relocate, amazing. I mean, working for Canva, going to Sydney.
Yeah, I know.
Apply for your visa. Great. Well, we should end it on that note and head over to Thea. I don't know. It's quite far north from Sydney. Brisbane is probably, I don't know. I mean, the distances are really far, so it must be like 1,000 kilometers, maybe 600-700 kilometers north of Sydney. Cool. All right, let's head over now. And welcome back. We're back here with Tea Dietterich, CEO of 2M Language Services. Hi, Thea.
Hi, Florian.
Hi.
Hey, where does this podcast find you?
Well, I'm here on the ocean in Sunshine Beach, Noosa, about 1.5 hours north of Brisbane in Australia.
Oh, wow. In Australia. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for doing this. It's a little late over there in Australia, but I think many people that are going to listen to this are going to envy where you are. The location's very beautiful at the ocean. So, especially during those times where people tend to be kind of confined. So, again, thanks so much for doing this. Tell us a little bit more about maybe your background and how did you end up in such a great place, such a nice place? And
I do have to say, listening to your last podcast, talking to fabulous Core, who I was on the gala board with him.
Mm-hmm.
You did say all these people who by accident get into the industry, and we've yet to have somebody here, who've actually really done this, studied this, and is there. Well, I'm one of them, right? There you go.
Okay.
I actually, I was born in Finland, 20 km from the Russian borderline in southeastern Finland, Lappeenranta, and I grew up in Germany, 20 km from the French borderline in western Germany, so on the foothills of the Black Forest in Offenburg, and I lived in Florida in the 80s. I got a scholarship from the American Congress and the German Bundestag, or parliament. And I lived in Granada in southern Spain. But I studied at the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz at the renowned faculty for applied linguistics in Germersheim. That's where I studied translation and interpreting. So there you go. So I'm a trained translator and interpreter.
Welcome, trained translator and interpreter to SlatorPod.
So what are your languages as well, out of interest? Because you've lived in different places.
My native languages are Finnish and German, and my major is Spanish and English, and I was really proud of that because if you had English first and Spanish second, you had the so-called Hausfrauenkombination, the housewife combination, you know. And now I had Spanish first, and I also have French. And then I have a hobby language, Italian, which I love as well.
Impressive.
But hang on, your native language, one of them is Finnish.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's
I know.
Only like the most complicated one out there, probably.
I know. And I used to go, Mom, you know, I mean, 4.8 million people speak that. Couldn't you like have Spanish or something useful? And then Finland became a member state of, you know, we used to be the European Community. It became the European Union. Finland became a member state, and suddenly, for interpreters, it was a joker language to get into the European Union, to Brussels, with a housewife combination. You know, not so easy. You got a joker language like Finnish, and nobody speaks Finnish unless they're Finnish. You know, obviously there's a few others, but so 15 cases, not 4 like in German, or 6 like, you know, Latin. No, 15. So yeah, hard language.
The words just are very long. I mean, I haven't even tried looking at it. I just today, actually, I machine translated a tweet, and it was okay-ish. But just you look at the words, and like, there's not even a hint of passive knowledge, right? When you're reading some other languages, you can recognize something. But we finished this. For me, there's zero. It's like, wow. Okay, so Finnish, and. You know, what about Australia? So that must have been a long journey, and then, I mean, Finnish didn't get you to Australia, so.
No, not really. So yes, look, it was 97, and where was I going to be? Maybe in rainy Brussels, you know, interpreting for politicians going to Sydney, heat up to the Olympic Games. So I went and worked for the German Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and was in charge of German Australian Olympic events, translation, interpreting. Sydney was the place to be back in 97, and yeah, that's how it started. I came to the country like this, and very soon, in 1999, I literally registered the business name. It was multimedia language service back then, right? Because multimedia was a really cool keyword back then, you know. Today we talk about multi-channels. It was multimedia. I knew that I was translating from CD-ROMs, which was very high tech at that time. You know, there was zip drives, and so it was. I started my business really in the back of my bedroom with a laptop.
Wow!
Yeah.
Wow! So the 2M stands for multimedia, then, like. Yeah,
multimedia is one, and marketing. Very soon, I realized, that it is not only about translation. So what we call today transcreation, right? I understood really soon that people don't care really about having anything translated. What they care is the impact. They want to enter a market. They want to keep people out of hospital because you give them access to information in another language. That's what counts. So at that time I was marketing. So yeah, that's where 2M came from. So we were multimedia language and marketing for many years until 2011 when we rebranded to 2M.
Yeah. See, I thought you were going to say that 2M had something to do with the millennium. like the turn of the millenniums, like 2000 or something. But no, there we go. Lots of different layers, maybe.
Look, lots of different layers, and you know, it depends on, you know, the glass of wine you drink. You can do anything out of it. You know, you can be multilingual, multi-channel, multicultural. But it really,
flexible.
that's where, that's where it came from. I started, you know, it as multimedia, is a multimedia language service back then.
Okay, so what about the core offering now of 2M, and what are some of the most important client segments for you?
Sure. So our verticals are mining, the resources industry, oil and gas, defense, health, medical technology, finance, and manufacturing, and of course the public sector, being here in Australia. In terms of the expertise, it's the so-called Cultural Translations, and we'll probably talk more about that. CULT is the Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Communities. So that's public sector. Obviously, marketing, technical translation, always subject matter expertise. We do interpreting, media localization, language technologies. But what probably is really what also stands out is we're specialized in rare and emerging languages. So your Pacific Island languages, Bislama, Solomon Island, Pidgin, Tuvaluan, Nauruan, Gilbertese, which is Kiribati, Marshallese, Tetum, Maori, and then displaced communities between between Thailand and Burma, like Rohingya, Chinhaka, and obviously indigenous. So these are languages we all do as well, apart from, of course, all the standard languages. We're also an English powerhouse in the Oceania region. So English is, of course, our native language here in Australia. And from over 100 languages, we translate into English. And because of our location, we're often the night shift, right, for many of these languages. And you look at the Australian dollar, which is, unfortunately for us, quite low at the moment. So it's quite competitive as well. And you wouldn't believe how much Australian adaptation we do. So we also do British adaptation, but into Australian.
Tell us a bit more about that, just for a second. Australian adaptation. What would that be? Like, I mean, I recognize the Aussie accent, but in the written form, what would that be?
Obviously, it depends. If it is, if there's rhetoric, logically the language changes. Otherwise, Australian English is largely British English with some American spelling in there. It also, standards change some of the measurements. We take some from the States, some from England. So it's a unique look. If you didn't have, the budget, you'd obviously go with your British English version for Australia. But we do a lot of Australian adaptation.
So are most of your customers Australia-based, or do you have a footprint elsewhere as well then?
Yeah, we're, obviously one of the leading LSPs in Australia, Oceania, but we have a large footprint in Europe, in France, Germany, Switzerland as well. This is medical technology and Novartis, some of those companies, Latin America, USA, and Asia Pacific. Pretty active. We've got offices. So our head office is in Brisbane. We have an office in Melbourne, in Manila, and in Paris, the Paris office since 2012. And we've got an office in Argentina and a very brand new office in Santiago de Chile as well.
Have you been there at all, or has COVID? Have you opened it remotely?
We honestly opened Santiago de Chile. I've got quite a strong Chilean contingent in my team, based in Australia, but no, I haven't been there.
See, that's
one for after COVID, when you'll be doing the rounds to all of your different offices.
That's right, Esther. Yes.
I think you can't. I mean, Australia is kind of still fully closed. I mean, not to talk too much about COVID, but there's not much travel in and out, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Borders are very tight. You can't come in unless you obviously have an Australian passport. And even then, you're stuck in quarantine for a while, and there's hardly any flights because of the caps. And we can't leave. You can leave if you're not an Australian citizen, but the borders are firmly closed. Even for compassionate grounds, it's very strict.
What do you mean you can't leave? They don't let you
No,
out
they
of the
don't.
country?
Unless if you said, well, I'm going to stay in Europe for a year, but they don't want people leaving and then coming back. So no, we can't leave. So my mom's in Germany. So I would, yeah. So it's pretty strict. I mean, I'm pretty connected, right? So first I thought, I can always leave. We work with defense, with everything. But yeah, no, it's very strict. You might have heard we had spikes in Melbourne.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very proud. 5 days, 0 cases. So we've turned Melbourne around, and we're pretty good here in Queensland. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, people are talking about it here, even about the Melbourne lockdown, like 3 months. It's kind of okay, that's what we would have to do to actually stop it. And then people are like, I don't think that's going to work. But all right, that was our weekly COVID update. But it's always interesting to hear from different places in Australia.
You can't avoid it.
Yeah, it's a very very unique situation there with basically being an entire continent. So it's probably different to manage. Let's talk about Australia as like a language services market. I don't know much about it. I mean, like, what are some of the top drivers? You mentioned mining, which, is something that's probably somewhat unique to Australia as like a driver for translation demand, as something that's, maybe there's some other geographies, but in Australia, this could be big. But what are some of the top 3 drivers of translation, but also interpreting demand?
Sure. Look, number one, obviously, is public sector. I mentioned the culturally and linguistically diverse communities. That is top driver. Private corporate, which is the export. Aussie, there's a lot of great Australian export stories. I mean, from underwear to wine, to tritium, to electric vehicle chargers, which you find more of them in 46 in inner city Hamburg alone, than between Cairns and Brisbane, which is 2,000 Ks. So all these companies need language services, localization, of course, to go into the export market. And then you have multinationals. So that would be my third. We've got some really big companies here. I mean, BHP, for example, was the largest mining company, or, Rio Tinto. But yeah, so those 3, public sector, exporting, and multinationals. That's translation. You asked about interpreting. Interpreting is number 1, hands down, public sector. Here we're talking healthcare, justice, so courts, and also private sector interpreting, utility, energy, insurance companies. This is, again, the multicultural Australia, those cult communities in Australia. And then there's conference interpreting is a smaller part of the pie, and pretty interesting to watch, with the RSI, so yeah. That's growing.
Yeah, it's growing. We had Kim on the podcast from Interprify, and the tripled revenues this year. So for the mining bit, do you have to be like in Perth, or it doesn't really matter where in Australia you are to service these clients? Like, is Australia kind of an integrated market in the sense that, like, doesn't really matter which city you're in, or for you to liaise with clients, pre-COVID, meet them, etc.? Does it matter where you are?
Well, our Melbourne office is in 171 Collins Street, which, by the way, they call the Paris End, of Melbourne. It is the BHP Tower, so we're literally in their building. Not that that's a reason, but obviously BHP is. If we just take that example, there is marketing out of Singapore, Santiago, Houston, London, Perth. Perth is a powerhouse for oil and gas, but so is and for the resources industry. But so is Queensland. So we are in all the right places. We are in Queensland. We've got a large footprint in Western Australia. I was based there for over 4 years myself. Australia's a large country, but it's a very small pond.
Yeah, it's like big distances. I just remember when I was based in Asia, there was a major housing shortage in Perth because everybody wanted to go to Perth because they had this major mining boom and like people would sell their garages for like $1 million Aussie dollars. So.
Yeah.
When we cover Australia on Slator, we came across a fair amount of these public sector contracts. Like, are these framework contracts, are they like as popular in Australia now as they are, for example, in the UK, where like, a new one of these frameworks is put out every other month where like you're then on a list as a vendor and the government agencies may choose or not choose to use you? Is that something that you're seeing in Australia as well?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit similar to the UK. There are framework contracts. The panel, the provider arrangements. So those panel arrangements are probably even more popular. Especially in the public sector. But utility companies, what I mentioned to you before, insurances and utility companies as well. This is for multicultural Australia, because we have so many languages here, the so-called LOAD, language other than English speakers. They put out those frame contracts. We sit on a lot of panels on Commonwealth, state, and local level. So for that, quite popular.
Sorry, Esther, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you're saying these three different levels. So, okay, so you're on that panel and then they have to use you, or are they like free to choose other vendors, or how does it work? Is there's kind of a prioritization, or you still have to like pitch each county or whatever it is in Australia again, or municipality?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them, right? So you sit on different panels, and that's still, you might never get anything, right? I mean, just depends. Well, then they might, in interpreting, for example, a job might go through, and then it just depends who takes it first. Translation, the quote, you might have to re-quote with the rates you gave in your, framework contract. Obviously, if you are the sole provider, which also happens, then you've got that contract. But if you're not, what you just asked, if you're not on the panel, largely then you don't get those opportunities from those government agencies. So you want to be on the panel. So, but having said that, again, some of the whole of government panels we're on as well, they also give leeway. Sometimes it's just a recommendation. But look, we sit on most panels across different states, across the Commonwealth, state, and local government, and each just got to be there.
And what are some of the differences then between the public sector and the private sector? I mean, maybe this sort of panel arrangement would be one. Is there differences in pricing or turnaround expectations or languages? How do you kind of tie the two or service the two within the same business as well?
Yeah, very different. Good question. I mean, look, most of the language service demand is in public sector. Where a lot of LSPs in this region focus on that. 2M's always been different. We've always focused on the private sector, even partly smaller in size, unless we work with our multinationals. The requirements are very different. They include export advice on target audience, consulting, international SEO, very different focus. Localization, because you're adjusting to the locale. Very different, very different if you translate for the Italians in Italy or for the Italians in Australia. I mean, I remember years ago we were doing content for Germans in Australia. I mean, that would have been, people in Germany would have been horrified to read that. But it is, this is not about, having an award-winning translation. This is about getting the message across and creating access to information for people. And it's a very different audience here. The cultural linguistically diverse communities. So even the Croatians and even the Vietnamese, you need to know, if you go into Vietnamese, is it in Queensland? Which corner of Queensland? Is this more, what kind of Vietnamese are there? So so it's a very different kettle of fish, as we say, if you work for if we do public sector, which is translating for non-English speakers in Australia, or if we're going exporting.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic, and really linguistically diverse, like you've said. I think we've come across an association, I believe, in previous coverage that we've done of Australia on Slator, NATI. So this is the national, I'll get this right, hopefully, National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. Can you tell us a bit about them? What do they do, and are they relevant to your business?
Sure, absolutely. They're very important player here. They're the standards body in Australia. They're owned and funded by the state and federal government. I have a long history with them. I'm a NATI certified translator interpreter myself. I sit on the technical reference advisory committee of NATI. I also sit on the regional advisory committee of NATI. And NATI, they test, they provide the certification, and they play a crucial role in public sector, right? Where NATI certified translators are required. That's a regulatory requirement. In the private sector, it's different. In the private sector, nobody cares or knows unless the documentation is required for migration purposes, for official purposes. Otherwise, what is important is you've got the subject matter expertise. Are you an engineer in oil and gas? Are you really in that, coal seam gas? That's what matters. So NATI is really in that public service sector. Is the main player, and look, NATI's come, watch them for 20 years. They are, they've come a long way, and they're ours. The body to provide standards in Australia.
I think that's where Australia is kind of ahead of many other countries, right? I mean, it seems very official and very well organized, and you have that certification which many other countries lack. Like maybe there is some type of certification, but not something that's kind of more very much well accepted, right? One thing I found interesting that you also have this translating and interpreting service, TIS National. So is that a competitor? It seems like it's a government organization that also competes for business. Is that true, or what do they do?
Sure. So you must be referring to TIS National.
Yeah, TIS National, yes.
Yeah, look, what comes to mind? Remember, go back in years. Remember those books called Yellow Pages?
Yes.
Right. So you always had the Yellow Pages 1300 number. A 1300 number in Australia is, you would only pay a local call, rate. So that's where, TIS is a government service for migrant languages, right? So not Indigenous languages, migrant languages, and they provide in certain circumstances. Government, translations. That's what they do. They've all obviously, and also interpreting. They outsource. So you say, is it? It's a competition. Well, they don't do. It's not like they do everything in house. That is the organization. They also outsource to other LSPs. So they're actually the client of other LSPs. So that's TIS National. Then we have similar government. Organizations state-wise as well. There are state-funded interpreting providers. For example, Multicultural New South Wales has their language service. For many years, they were called Community Relations Commission, and they were the only ones who were allowed to translate driver's licenses in New South Wales. Whereas in Queensland or in other states, NATI certified translators could translate them, So you've got them. They're very much cult orientated. So they wouldn't be providing localization services for Australian companies exporting or your multinationals, let alone tech. So our orientation has always been smart workflows, technology standards, and the private sector does not really consider them. At all, so they're really they're important. They have a mission, and they have a mandate, to ensure there's access to information for Australia's multicultural communities.
I have so many questions about Australia in that multicultural community.
Sure.
Because how like, is that all first generation immigrants that need those types of services, or would it also, like, even in the second or third generation, there's still, like, English would still not be their kind of first language? Or, like, it seems that it's so important, that particular, like, that access component, right? So is this all for first generation immigrants, or what's the...
Yeah, it's a great
I don't
question,
know.
Florian. I mean, I could paint you, an amazing picture of these languages and how they've evolved over years when, when it was all Italian and the Greek, right? And today, we're looking at Rohingya. This is displaced communities. I think I mentioned them before, Chinhaka. We're looking at, Sudan. We're looking at, so today, the influx could be refugees, but as you know, even if you've lived all your life in a country, you just need to go to Spain, to Benidorm, and you will find still Germans who hardly speak Spanish, or even in Mallorca you will find them. And so you will find in those many countries people who have buying power and don't speak that language. And we all know what it takes to get to them, So you can still we've got Chinese communities here, Vietnamese communities, who, it's their language. So no, it's not second, third generation, because of course the young ones, they grow up here and they all sound, Aussie, logically. But it... it's all the influx. This is a migration country, just as the States, just as Canada. I often talk to our Canadian, the Canadian Translation Bureau, we all have similar issues and just talking points, also with regards to Indigenous, of course, as well.
We typically ask our most of our guests about mergers and acquisitions, obviously stepping away from the sort of multicultural, multilingualism of Australia. But what are your thoughts on kind of consolidation in this industry, particularly the big deals that have happened this year with SDL, RWS, Amplexor and Accolade? Does this have an impact on your day-to-day? We all observe and watch the super agencies, but at the moment in the day-to-day, it doesn't make a difference. However, they're there, we observe them. They have the power to squeeze smaller LSPs out of the market. And I would say the weakness of the smaller LSPs is clearly the limited budget for tech and R&D, clearly. So there's a solution. You got to be switched on, A solution is really, from my opinion, partnership with tech companies. So if you can't have an in-house development team, you need to have really solid partners. So we need to, not fear them, but it's tech, right? So if I should quote another fellow industry leader, Veronique Oskaya, right, who famously said, "Collaboration is the new competition," and that is one of my mantras. We collaborate. We have strategic technology partnerships here, so we can have in-house all of that tech that those super agencies can have, because that is, in my opinion, the biggest, that's what we're up to, the bigger they get, they just have the budget for technology. And look, technology is the single most economic driver of the future. So let's talk a little bit more about that technology, translation productivity technology, CAT, TMS, PEMT. Where do you see all of this going? Right. You mean what, CAT? Machine translation? That's what you're asking? Yeah, sure. Just how the ecosystem is developing. You were mentioning collaboration. Do you see the future as very much collaborative between these tools, or just some of your thoughts on how tech is kind of evolving and changing in our industry? Yeah, look,
like number one, API. I mean, API is the religion. So API ecosystem, number one. And look, I was still on the Gala board when the Gala initiative topic, the translation API cases and classes was started, driven by many rock stars in the industry, including Klaus Fleischmann. Yeah, that's extremely important. Tech, look, machine translation. I mean, we never talk about post editing. MT is important. It's a productivity tool, right? So it's part of the workflow in, like, not in all languages, right? But and not for all, obviously not for your transcreation, not when we do advertising or bylines for Rolex. But it's a productivity tool. That's all there is. The translator is not, at the end, we're responsible for the output. It doesn't matter. That whole deliberation of, well, it would have been better if I had translated it from scratch instead of sort of cleaning up. That doesn't fly anymore. I mean, that was for a while the narrative while we had statistical machine translation. But with NMT, the whole ballgame has changed. You really have to be, switched on. And I honestly can talk the talk, right? Because when I introduced about 2 years ago, when I introduced NMT as into the workflow for some languages, I honestly went in there and what you call post-edited. I went in there myself, and I learned. I know how switched on you've got to be to have. Is it helpful? Yes. Is it not helpful? Then you just rewrite it. But for me, NMT was a revelation, an absolute revelation. It gave me, somebody else was doing sort of the bulk of the work, and I had time to concentrate on the creative stuff, on the important stuff, on the technical stuff. Fantastic productivity tool. And it weeded out immediately. You have to be quite an accomplished linguist. And it weeded out, like, I understood very early on, Die Katze ist schwarz, the cat is black. We don't need a translator for that anymore. Gone, right? So so much work for translators, but for creative, great linguistic minds, and obviously for all those domain experts out there. And then lastly, in terms of tech, the ability to deliver increasingly smaller work packages in a streamlined way is very important. So we're talking on-demand apps. That is really important. We've got one ourselves. So painting you the picture, again, back to the cult communities. A cyclone is coming, and you need to, where the low-lying areas are. Which, for example, there could be Pacific Island languages, and you need to get the warnings out immediately to fix, to clean up your backyard. Let's go back to Melbourne when we had 2 towers that had COVID infections. They got evacuated, and people were scared. They got partly evacuated, partly isolated. So you need apps to be able to have very small text immediately in languages. We're not talking German, Spanish here, right? We're talking and emerging languages. So you need to be able to cater for that. So that's really important as well. So that's where we have an R&D division, and that's where we are currently developing our on-demand apps. Pretty exciting, and RSI, of course. RSI has been huge this year.
Of course. Hey, Australia, we're writing a lot about companies that are listed in Australia. So we got this Appen, Straker, and now AI Media. Now, let me ask you this question. Why Australia? Why do LSPs list in Australia, or the 3 that have over the past half decade, exclusively in Australia, not in Europe, not in the US? What's so special about Australia?
You are asking me that. I thought you would, because you always hop on about this. This is great. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, first of all, Appen and AI Media, can I just say, they're not really language service providers. They're fantastic. I mean, Appen is an amazing story. But, they're not they're not traditional LSPs. So
probably AI media slightly more than Appen. Appen, yes, it's right. It's kind of full on data. I think AI media does do a fair amount of services.
Yeah, data collection. AI media comes obviously from the transcription and from others. Straker is a great story for our region. I mean, there's one gutsy entrepreneur, controversial, of course, as well, but very gutsy. So look, what can I say? The ASX, look, there's strong governance and legal framework, right, on the ASX. So I'm actually just studying, can you believe it? When I do have some spare time and I'm not jumping into that ocean right here in front of me, I'm actually at the moment about to graduate from the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So I've been studying on corporate governance. So I sit on a few boards, but I can just more confidently sit on an ASX listed company's board. So the strong governance and legal framework I mentioned to you gives confidence to investors. So potentially, is that a reason? But otherwise, let's see where I end up. If I sit on some of those ASX listed company boards, I'll be able to give you more information.
Yeah. I think it's what I remember from my friend. They have these super, what do you call it? Those kind of pension schemes. So there's so much money money looking for a home, and maybe that's where it's going partially. Hey, we did talk a bit about COVID, but not about the impact on like the business and your operations. Like, how do you manage this now? Have you always been fully remote? And like, how do you interact with clients? How do you sell during those times? Develop new business? Just like, it's really interesting to hear from entrepreneurs how they've managed that transition.
Yeah, sure. Good. Look, we had a massive year. So we're growing a lot, and we're in a growth phase anyway. RSI. Of course, look, we were here. I listened to Kim the other day on your podcast, of course, and logically also for us, interpreting suddenly gone, right? I had been harping on about, not only RSI, but VRI. As a matter of fact, I mean, we demoed to governments already back in end of 2017. I remember doing demos and my CTO outside pretending to be the German translator, right? Doing, video. And, sometimes the market wasn't ready. I actually remember also a gala conference in Boston, and we had this sort of, the tables afterwards and the knowledge fests, and we all, some of us interpreting providers went like, the market's not ready. We're like there, but the market's not there yet, right? Well, COVID, the market was there. They had to. And by the way, can I say, not only the market, also the supply chain. The supply chain wasn't there either. We all know that the interpreters were not all, but many interpreters, very judgmental about RSI, as if it was the EasyJet to compare to Air France or Lufthansa, right? And suddenly what was a threat became a lifeline. Obviously, with the right remuneration and everything. So it's been actually a very, very exciting year in business in terms of coming. RSI's gone through the roof for us. And not only conferences, we don't actually have that many international conferences in Australia, but because suddenly international workshops, seminars, board meetings, town halls, where Australian interpreters are actually benefiting, because before people were traveling to, let's say, Peru to do social responsibility mining workshops with Shushotash interpreters in Peru. Well, they're all being online, and and Australian interpreters get to do that on RSI. So RSI has been great. You asked about clients. Well, look, you Zoom it, you Team it, probably more than WebEx, sometimes obviously on WebEx. I think we're just, in Australia, is of course the tyranny of distance. So for me, it was normal to jump in a plane in the morning to have lunch with a client in Canberra and go to a function in Melbourne, all in the same day. now we just Zoom it. And you can be really clever with online events, I have to say. If you go to a physical event, then you have to sometimes wait and hope that the keynote speaker has time to talk to you. Whereas online, everybody's online. So you can listen, make some notes, and then you hop on LinkedIn, and you're just clever. You can really work it very well. So, the opportunities are there.
Very, very good. No, I'm glad to hear that it's been a good year. What are your thoughts for 2021? Well, outlook,
Right.
industry, your business, all of us.
Well, RSI is here to stay, clearly. I think, massive amounts of hardware equipment will be thrown away. Of course, there'll be hybrid events. But yeah, RSI is here to stay. E-commerce, growth in digital content and the globalization requirements have increased even more. VRI has a long way to go in Australia still. For us, it is really MT in long tail languages. That's something that excites me, because language technology is, and I'm quoting here Naomi Bowman. She said language technology. I think it was at a panel at Luckworld. Language technology is about providing access, right? And we're really passionate about this. So we put in a lot of investment into into creating access to information, to crucial information in those in the long tail languages which we have, including indigenous languages, which we deliver, and that comes back to purpose, really. I think every company, Slator has a purpose. We have a purpose, and it really is, providing access, and this is something that drives us. So, as I said before, look, technology is the most single important, economic driver of the future, and it is really language technology combined with that precious human linguistic mind. I think if language technology has exposed one thing, is that, the linguists are more important than ever, but you've really got to be super switched on. And there's lots of them. So exciting times ahead.
Great. So look, our purpose is to get this fantastic interview online as soon as possible. so thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
good evening. Good evening. It's pretty late here in Australia. We're early risers, 5 a.m. So it's 9:20 p.m. in Queensland. So way past my bedtime.
We'll let you go. Thanks so much, Tia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.